This week, WatchGuard makes an acquisition. Riverbed acquired a company and is launching some pretty neat Wi-Fi security stuff, which we'll talk about. Antivirus comparatives for 2017, which is always a fun topic for John and I to talk about. Along the lines of AV and endpoint protection, Cylance is bringing their endpoint protection to an entirely new market. 12 startups to watch that recently got funding. Oracle makes some moves to help OpenSSL security. One Identity makes a debut of a new product announcement. And putting credentials inside of a vault. Story about a company that I've come across that I'm actually pretty excited about as it's solving a somewhat of a newer challenge when it comes to protecting your credentials and secrets. We'll talk about security policies and procedures as well. All that and more on this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The teleprompter now has artificial intelligence, Doug, and updates itself. It's awesome. This week, and talk about them as it relates to enterprise security. You're going to do great.
I think that people think that you and I talk like every day at night. You know, It's like, hey, what are you doing? It's kind of a bit of an exhausting week. And I think that we noticed that a little bit in the stories for this week as well.
IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team's skills up to date. IT Pro TV's team solution provides group pricing and access to their supervisor portal. You'll gain full control over your team's training schedule, see individual and group analytics, and more. IT Pro TV does IT live every day, so you know you're getting the most current IT training. Go to itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the code ES30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. This is actually the Secure Digital Life set. It's a long story. I have a lot of ADD when it comes to sets and stuff. So that's the set. And we get a different angle on it. We got all kinds of cool stuff. We got something that I picked up at DEF CON. See that like panel right there? It's like some radio frequency monitoring panel type thing. I forget the name on it. It's an EMR 4142. It's a PBW tunable discriminator. I just like saying tunable discriminator because I think it's cool. John Strand is here with us on the lines. He is the living, breathing tunable discriminator on security vendors, John Strand.
I just can't believe it. It's like, Paul, I think we should move our show over here because it has better chi and flow. You're turning into such a diva. I remember whenever you were doing your shows out of a shack.
Yes, I have done them.
You had a shack in the back underneath your deck.
Yes.
And the only warmth we had was from your cigars.
Yes,
and
those were the days.
That was literally the last time we liked your cigars.
Well, and you know what's funny? The reason we're on this set is actually because we bought a new humidor, and it's being like assembled in the next, and there wasn't enough room to set up the cameras. So
you. Oh God!
It's so, and everyone's like, "Oh, you can get rid of the coolers in your." I'm like, "No, this is additional storage for more cigars."
And speaking of cooler, I'm not doing the whole hipster thing today.
Yes, you are.
With the hat in the summertime. I've actually got a cold. I turned 40 and have spent the last 3 days apparently feeling hungover and horrible. So,
well, happy birthday.
Thanks,
well, that was
man,
a while ago, wasn't it? Was that recently that you?
No. That was the birthday on Facebook that you saw is actually my wife's birthday.
Oh, okay.
So whenever I start getting Facebook birthday messages, it's like, holy crap, it's my wife's birthday. So that's my reminder.
That's brilliant.
And yeah, my birthday was on Sunday.
A couple of quick announcements really quick because my teleprompter failed on me. We need to find a better teleprompter. Send us suggestions, psw@securityweekly.com for teleprompters because this one sucks. IT Pro TV, make sure you go to itprotv/enterprise security. Use the discount ES30. What that's going to give you is if you're an organization and you work for an enterprise, as many of you do who listen and watch this show, you can have your manager go buy a subscription to IT Pro TV, distribute those accounts to the team, assign training modules on a per individual basis, and monitor your progress and work with you to allot time so that you can get training. Because we all need training. We work in security. Training is a wonderful thing. So make sure you check out IT Pro TV and an awesome webcast, domaintools.com/security weekly. Tim and Kyle work for Domain Tools. They're super, super smart. You probably recognize them from this show and other circles. They're going to be talking about domains and IP addresses. And John, we were actually just talking about Domain Tools yesterday and some of the awesome things that they do. So make sure you check that out. On to the enterprise security news for this week. WatchGuard has acquired an authentication provider, DataBlink. From what I can tell, John, DataBlink is essentially like your RSA token two-factor authentication provider. And now everyone says, well, we work at the cloud, but that's not like of course you do, because that's where people need to authenticate, right? That's kind of how they spun it. But it's really like a Yubico, I think, is more maybe towards the mid-market. I know they have enterprise offerings, the RSA token, and so this is another offering. When you're in the enterprises, John, what do you see most often when they're implementing some kind of authentication system? Is it kind of spread out, or are there some leaders that are penetrating the enterprise?
It's all over the place. I mean, of course, you're going to see RSA as one of the main leaders constantly everywhere that you go. But whenever we're looking at this type of authentication, like DataBlink, I really think that this is going to be a much bigger it's going to be a bigger growth market in the security industry moving forward over the next 10 to 24 months, I would say. And it's going to be a quiet one. The reason why it's going to be a quiet one is simply because it's not splashy, it's not new, it's not sexy. But out of all the things that'll actually shut down a lot of attacks, this is right up there. And usually whenever we break into an organization that's using these types of technologies, it's not that they're using them incorrectly. It's that they have these technologies implemented over these doors to have two-factor authentication coming in, but they don't necessarily have it across all doors. And that's usually where they make mistakes. So I think this is going to continue to grow in sales. I think it's going to be a good place for people to invest. I recommend it to our customers on a regular basis, but I think it's going to be kind of shadowy and quiet because it's not splashy and new.
Yeah. And I run into that issue as well, speaking of covering all the doors, with just simple things like, oh, I need API access to that web application, and therefore I have to spend time recoding to support SSL or turn off SSL or turn off the authentication mechanisms that would normally be present for my API. And I think that's one of the doors that's typically left open, right, John? Yeah,
quite a bit.
Riverbed, this is really cool. So it looks like, and the announcement wasn't clear, it says Riverbed has launched Xirrus Wi-Fi access points. Riverbed looks like they acquired Xirrus that makes the access point solution. And these are pretty cool. Now, I don't know how much, this is penetrated into the enterprise market. Typically, you see Cisco and Aruba still on the enterprise front. I have talked with
Ruckus.
Enterprise.
Yeah.
Ruckus is another one. Some people try and roll their own, which is kind of more on the monitoring side, right? They'll have Cisco. Well, they have Cisco, and they're like, well, I don't necessarily want to use Cisco's monitoring because it's either more money and or it doesn't work quite right, or both. And so they try and do their own monitoring. They're like, wow, well, I can get Kismet and Linux and or Kali or whatever. But this one's really cool. It has Bluetooth Low Energy on the access point. It's a 3-radio device, and it says that it provides Layer 7 application visibility right on the access point. I'm not sure you want that.
It's literally a sticker?
Yeah.
It's a sticker.
It's a sticker.
I'll be damned. That's fantastic.
So
it's a good sticker to have.
I'm not sure that doing Layer 7 on your access point is necessarily the right solution. Well, I don't know.
It is for some things. Like, for example, if you're just doing MAC address filtering, which a lot of these tools, they just don't do straight MAC address filtering, but whenever they're doing authentication, they'll basically say that this particular MAC address has authenticated already, And it's not like it's authenticated strictly by MAC address, but that particular system has authenticated somehow.
Yep.
So you can do MAC address cloning, and then you can jump onto that access point. However, what they're starting to do quite a bit, I think someone's trying to call me. Let me close this out. Go away, people. What you can do with that layer 7 analysis is if you're doing MAC address whitelisting for like iPads, or you're doing MAC address and saying that a MAC address has authenticated, then what you can do is look at the MAC address, and you can look at like the user agent string to make sure that it actually matches up, so that somebody isn't just cloning a MAC address, jumping on the access point after somebody's session, after they've logged off or their session is still active. So it's cool, but sometimes you got to wonder exactly how useful it actually is.
Exactly. Of course, there's a lot of companies that compare antivirus software. And I'm curious to see like where you fall on this, John. Like, is it useful to even read these articles? This one was specific to Mac antivirus. Is this something that enterprises are doing? Is it not even an issue yet with other operating systems like Linux and OS X for larger enterprises? And how much attention should we pay to folks that are analyzing the effectiveness of antivirus systems?
Well, I would say, really, to be honest, whenever you're talking about AV for Mac, the only one that seems to be even remotely good isn't even in this report. It's Sophos. And that doesn't mean that it's great. It just means that it's better. I know that Brian King did some analysis from BHIS, or BB King, as we call him. He's done some analysis on Sophos, and it actually is better than quite a bit of antivirus, even on the Windows side. Actually, that's pretty true for Sophos across the board. Sophos has been doing really, really, really well. But one of the big concerns that we have, and there's somebody that tweeted this earlier yesterday, they basically said you cannot just test antivirus solutions by throwing known antivirus like samples at it. You've got to do some custom malware at these solutions, and that's one of the things that seems to be lacking from a lot of these reports, is that throwing something custom, let somebody spend 10, 15 minutes writing some custom malware and then throw it at it and see how it works. And a lot of these products just fall flat on their face there.
Very interesting, John. That's what Grimm's Crossbow product actually does.
Maybe it was the Grimm Twitter link that did it.
It probably was, because I caught up with Grimm. Obviously, they sponsored our DEF CON interview series, and I caught up with Bryson. Do you know Bryson?
Yep. Well, I haven't met him actually directly, but we do know Matthew Carpenter exceedingly well. He's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, I caught up with Matt at DEF CON, and so what Crossbow does is exactly that, John. It lets you basically build custom malware. It's kind of like Lego blocks, lets you custom build malware and then deploy it safely in your environment, which I thought, in terms of security products, have we ever seen a security product like that? I thought it was one of those truly innovative ones.
I think it is truly innovative. And that's one of the things that, I'm talking with Ed Scotus about this now for SANS classes. And if you guys, by the way, anybody that's listening to the show, if you would like to see a class that's created on testing software, not just security software, but just testing software in general, and security software would be part of that, shoot me an email, because we're trying to gauge the interest in that. But basically going through and what are the different solutions that exist out there, open source and possibly even commercial, to test your software to make sure that they're doing the right things, like they're using safe SEH in their executables whenever they're running. Data execution prevention isn't disabled. And maybe security testing. How do you test your AV solutions? Paul, we've done tons of webcasts on this topic. Maybe that's something that could be consolidated into a class. And if it's not, something would be interested for like a 6-day class, we might be able to do a webcast series on it as well.
Yeah, no, I like it. Speaking of endpoint protection, Cylance is bringing their enterprise security platform technology to home users. And I know this isn't necessarily like enterprise news, but they're traditionally an enterprise company. A spokesperson for Cylance did say the consumer market is ripe for disruption. That's their quote. I thought that was a pretty epic quote.
It is an epic quote, and he's right. And this actually does impact enterprise security quite a bit. So Cylance, using machine learning and artificial intelligence, basically the quality of what is coming out of that, think of artificial intelligence and machine learning as a black box for right now. But the quality of what those algorithms generate has to do with the quality of the inputs that are coming in. So if you're just working on enterprises, then you're getting a certain level of inputs and you're not getting a whole bunch. But if all of a sudden you extend to the home users, all of a sudden now you have this much larger vacuum of good samples of malware and bad samples of malware that are now coming in, and that's going to make their product better. As much as we've kind of ripped on Cylance over the past year or so, mainly for their marketing, from a technological perspective and innovation, they're very, very good at what they do as far as the artificial intelligence, but they have ran into a few hiccups. This will actually help them build better data sets for their artificial intelligence and machine learning. So in the long run, this is going to be great. And it's also a response to Microsoft. What is their product, Paul? Advanced Threat Protection, which is doing Cylance-like activity, but their data sets that they're pulling from are going to be 3.8 billion machines. And that's going to be very difficult for Cylance to actually catch up. So the question is, if you're putting this in the enterprise, why would you go with a product with Cylance that has a much smaller install base? And this is trying to scratch that itch. Also, I'd like to throw out, it's kind of disappointing. We've tested Cylance a couple of times since we've made them very angry with our blog posts. And we haven't seen a lot of movement in the product getting better lately over the past month or so. So that's a little bit disappointing. So hopefully things like this will actually make the product a lot better moving forward.
Did you, and I did not put this in the notes, but I did read an article last night, and I don't remember the source, but there was a company that discovered that the place where Carbon Black sends its file samples that it doesn't recognize, it sends them to what they call like a multi-scanner source up in the cloud, didn't
Sandbox.
protect the individual company's data. So once they had access to the multi-source, they were able to see other companies' files that were out there. Did you see that article, John? And what are your thoughts?
Yes, I did. And we've actually seen that same thing with some of the testing of some of the vendors, Cylance being one of them, where they've been able to actually backtrace to exactly what customer we were testing based on the file names. So anytime you have a vendor that's going to be shoving data up into the cloud, you pretty much have got to assume that you're going to have executables, you're going to have things that are going to be shoved into the cloud and sandboxed. And it gets into question of who has access to that data. And those are all questions that you need to ask your vendor, whether or not it's Carbon Black, whether or not it's Cylance, whether or not it's CrowdStrike. Whenever they're using machine learning, whether they're doing this white listing, black listing, gray listing approach, you're going to lose control of some of the things that are on the inside of your network. And I was surprised that people were surprised by this, but I could see how people would be, because they honestly think that artificial intelligence and crap like that is black magic, but they don't understand that they're actually doing a lot of that offloading. I think Quaihu 360, an antivirus from China, if I'm mispronouncing it, I apologize, was one of the first people to start doing this at scale. And it is actually a very effective approach. But once again, you just have to be careful and understand that if you have sensitive things in your executables, it's going to be thrown up into a sandbox somewhere and somebody else may gain access to it.
Yeah, that was kind of scary. 12 startups that raised funding in July of 2017. John and I are still looking into a lot of the companies that are here. Darktrace is one we recognize. RiskLens, I did see at Black Hat. I did not get a chance to catch up with them. ZeroFox, I did. And
tell me about ZeroFox.
So one of the problems that I identify when I look at penetration testing, both from the pen tester side and from the defensive side, is that initial information gathering using social media to acquire targets. And so how do you do that effectively as a pen tester, right? And I know, John, you and I have had many conversations, and the testers go through this too, like what's the best way to do that? What access gets turned off, from scraping on various social media sites? And then from a defender side, like how do I can't control what people put on social media to a certain extent. I mean, I can put false accounts on there, but that violates the terms of service for a lot of social media providers. So what ZeroFox does is monitor that. It monitors your social media and gives you an early warning of when someone might be making new connections to your employees on social media, and gives you control over that. And that's a very high level. The details I discussed with ZeroFox were pretty impressive. So it's hopefully a vendor that we're going to hear more from, because I really think they hit on that problem, John, of how you protect your social media presence for your organization against threat actors like pen testers or actual evil bad guys.
Well, Well, and I think that this is one of those areas that, like you mentioned at the onset, is very shady for pen testers to go after, because a lot of times we're going after individuals that may be considered out of scope in a lot of situations. But at the same time, as far as gathering information and recon, anytime someone is trying to attack your organization, we are going to go after shiny things. And a shiny thing would be an individual that is on LinkedIn, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, and they're constantly tweeting, they're constantly posting things on LinkedIn, they're constantly posting pictures of their food on Facebook or whatever the hell it is that they do. And that, for us, means that that particular individual needs something. They need some level of affirmation on a much larger scale. And we can actually leverage that in a penetration test to highly target that individual as part of a social engineering campaign. And many customers actually back away from this. They're like, no, that's too creepy. But it is something bad guys do in fact do. I mean, if you remember, Paul, last year there was a big series of news stories about wire transfer fraud. And they were basically targeting individuals that had the ability to do wire transfers, and they were doing a little bit of social engineering on the background, doing some research before they actually launched the attack in order to be more successful. So I think that this is an incredibly important project, and I do wonder how much of this underneath the hood is actually Recon NG by Tim Tomes.
Yeah, of course, they're applying some machine learning algorithms, of course, to this, but they made sense, the ones that they were describing to me. And I think that we're learning that when a vendor says machine learning, we're learning like what questions to ask. And you're like, so we're like, what does that mean? They're like, well, if you have a social media account and someone connects with them or friends them or whatever, if that connecting account has a very short lifetime, in other words, if it's just been created, then that's a flag. And then if that new account starts connecting to people in the same organization, that's even more of a red flag. So there are some indicators that I think really made sense for me, and I thought was a great solution for that problem of like, how do I protect the social media presence?
And finally, we have seen especially large financial institutions do this type of work before by using tools like Recon NG or using Maltego is another one that you can do it. But they do a lot of that work by hand.
Right.
And basically looking at this product and kind of looking at what they do, it looks like it automates a tremendous amount of effort that a security analyst would have to go through to try to pull and do the data connection between all the different points. So yeah, you can do it on your own. You can do it on your own for free. Have fun, go forth, go do it. But if you're doing it at scale for a very large organization, this is definitely a product that you need to look into.
Yeah, there was one of the ones on the Black Hat vendor floor that impressed me. So props to you guys. Oracle joins SafeLogic, develops a FIPS module for OpenSSL security. John, what is FIPS and why do people care?
So FIPS 140-2 is a series of, not necessarily regulations, but it's a series of guidance documents from the United States government that identifies what types of crypto libraries and how they should are allowed to be used and how they're allowed to be used. I don't know exactly how applicable it is today for like real world attacks, but I do know that almost any government standard that you're looking into whenever you're implementing security standards for web servers encryption or browser encryption, even SSH encryption, encryption at rest, a lot of times you'll see it has to be FIPS 140-2 compliant. So a lot of organizations that are doing that type of compliance will have to go into their browser and they'll basically have to remove encryption algorithms that are not 140-2 compliant. And that becomes very, very difficult. And when you're dealing with OpenSSL, you have to actually do the exact same thing. You have to remove any of the combinations of crypto hashing or encryption that are not 140-2 compliant. So there's two things about this that I think are great. One, basically working with the OpenSSL community to develop a module that allows that OpenSSL FIPS 140-2 compliance is great. But it also kind of speaks to, Paul, we've had news stories in the past. We found out over the years that OpenSSL is like four guys in a basement somewhere, with a box of pizza on the floor that are basically responsible for securing pretty much everything that we do across the board. And while there's a lot of things I disagree with Oracle about, it's nice to see them actually step up and start contributing financially to something that is such a huge underpinning to absolutely everything we do in security.
Yeah, absolutely. One Identity has debuted a new product called Safeguard 2.0 for privileged account security. So here we go again in the privileged identity management space, John.
And once again, I mean, who are all the people that we see on this? Once again, I'm not feeling very well. But we got like Cyber Guardian, Mike Yaffe went to Beyond Trust.
Beyond Trust had an announcement in this arena as well. They're now supporting Google Cloud with their privileged account and identity management. Yeah.
That's cool. Yaffe should pick up the phone and call us every once in a while.
I saw him in passing, and we exchanged hand gestures. I won't.
Did he grab you inappropriately?
No, just remote hand gestures.
What about Dave Kennedy? Did he grab you inappropriately?
I don't think I saw Dave when I was out at Black Hat and DEF CON.
Weird, because it looked like he was everywhere. But back on topic.
Anyway.
Sorry, I'm derailing the show and taking it more the security route. This once again, I can't stress this enough. If your organization's looking at some security things to implement, privileged access management is finally mature enough that I'm recommending it enough to a number of our customers. And, this idea of identity and access management, two-factor authentication, privileged access management, it's going to be one of those things that's going to get a lot of sales, a tremendous amount of traction because it works. If it's implemented everywhere, it's implemented correctly, it is a fantastic tool. So I think this will be one of those things that's going to be a real growth, especially in the rest of 2017 and 2018, and it's going to be less buzzworthy growth.
I like this next one because it involves open source technology from HashiCorp. They're the developers of Vagrant, which is the open source deployment. It's kind of like a heavy Docker is the way I would describe it, although I'll probably get crap for that. But anyway.
Already people are sending us emails.
Yes.
But you also like HashiCorp because their name sounds awesome.
Yeah, it is a pretty cool name, and they have open source and commercial products. One of their open source products is a vault for managing secrets. And I actually came up against this and am considering implementing it in one of our applications because you have this problem when you have an application that reaches out to multiple APIs on various platforms. You end up having all of these secrets to protect. And how you do that is somewhat of a mystery. I don't think there's any. There are some like unofficial guidelines, but it's not really well documented when you're a developer, or maybe it is depending on your situation. In any case, it's a problem that you're going to come up against today because when you develop applications today, they're going to need to talk to other stuff. They're going to have to authenticate to that other stuff, and you're going to have to store some of those secrets. When you do that, you can use a vault. So, let's say you're connecting to YouTube and LinkedIn maybe and Facebook, and you're reaching out to a blog. All of those different connections have essentially secret keys, and you want to store those in the vault. And this is an open source platform to do that, which I hope to be able to look into.
Well, let's also be honest. It's either this or the alternative that we see a lot, Paul. It shows up on GitHub. And GitHub is not a place for your secrets.
Yes, that is kind of the result of the problem, right? That is, you search GitHub, you could find a lot of those things. So,
well, and it's one of those problems, we were talking about like cloud security, Docker security, and we were talking about a lot of people don't have their arms around what these problems actually look like. This is a problem. Yeah. If you're using Docker, if you're using Amazon, if you're using Azure, this is a problem. We are actively using this to break into organizations today.
Oh, and interesting. So you've seen this on Pentest. You scour for secrets, and because there's essentially credentials, right?
Exactly. They are effectively credentials. Now, it's a little bit harder because what you're going to have to do is figure out how the API works, how you can use that secret to access things on the back end. But it's absolutely, I would say, put it in a medium advanced attack methodology. Mm-hmm. So I know that Chris Gates is coming out with the toolkit. I've been talking about this for weeks now, so hopefully Chris gets that out soon. He's been playing with it quite a bit. But this is an area. This is not FUD. This is an area that directly relates to attacks and successful breaches that we've done at BHIS.
Fantastic. We're going to take a very short break, come back and talk about security policies and procedures, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.